Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Brajajana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Dana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradari Labha Girivaradari Yashoda Nandana Brajajana Ranjana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki Jai, Shri Giraj Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 22, Text 53. You can see that. Evam Adhyatma Yogena, Evam Adhyatma Yogena, Karmanusamacharan, Karmani anusamacharan, Putram upadayam asha, Putram upadayam asha, Panchar ishyatma samatam, Panchar ishyatma samatam, Evam Adhyatma Yogena, Karmani anusmacharam, Putram upadayam asha, Pancharshiyatma samatam. Evam Adhyatma Yogena, Karmani anusamacharam, Putram upadayam asha, Pancharshiyatma samatam. Evam Adhyatma Yogena, Karmani anusmacharam, Putran utpadayam asha, Pancharshyatmasamatanam Evamatyatma yogena Karmanyanusmacharam Utpadram utpadayamasa Pancharshyatmasamatanam Evam thus Adhyatma yogena by the means of bhakti yoga Karmani activities Anu always Samacharan executing Putran sons Utpadayanasha begotten Pancha 5 Archisi in his wife Archie Atma own Samatam according to his desire. Translation. Being situated in the liberated position of devotional service, Prithu Maharaj not only performed all fruitive activities, but also begot 5 sons by his wife Archie. Indeed, all his sons were begotten according to his own desire. We can repeat. Being situated in the liberated position of devotional service, Prithu Maharaj not only performed all fruitive activities, but also begot 5 sons by his wife Archie. Indeed, all his sons were begotten according to his own desire. Purport by his and translation by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. As a householder, Prithu Maharaj had 5 sons by his wife Archie, and all these sons were begotten as he desired them. They were not born whimsically or by accident. How one can beget children according to one's own desire is practically unknown in the present age, Kali Yuga. In this regard, the secret of success depends on the parents' acceptance of the various purificatory methods known as samskaras. The first samskara, the garbhadan samskara, or child begetting samskara, is compulsory, especially for the higher castes, the brahmanas and the kshatriyas. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, sex life which is not against religious principles is Krishna himself. And according to religious principles, when one wants to beget a child, he must perform the garbhadan samskara before having sex. The mental state of the father and mother before sex will certainly affect the mentality of the child to be begotten. A child who is begotten out of lust may not turn out as the parents desire. As stated in the Shastras, yata yonir yata bijam. Yata yoni indicates the mother, yata bijam indicates the father. If the mental state of the parents is prepared before they have sex, the child which they will beget will certainly reflect their mental condition. It is therefore understood by the words Atma Samatan that both Prithu Maharaj and Archie underwent the Garbhadan purificatory process before begetting children, and thus they begot all their sons according to their desires and purified mental states. Prithu Maharaj did not beget his children out of lust, nor was he attracted to his wife for sense gratificatory purposes. He begot the children as a grihasta for the future administration of his government all over the world. Just a second. Can't see everybody clearly. Om Gyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Guruve namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Kadambakhanam Swami Nityanapane. Hare Krishna. Wonderful verse to get. I was thinking, how do I speak about this verse in a room with temple devotees? Like, how is it going to apply to everybody? But there's also our broader devotee community, actually a lot of whom who listen to these classes. So just bear in mind that when I'm speaking, I'm also thinking about all these devotees. So in this verse, we're hearing about Prithu Maharaj, as we have been hearing for quite a while. And this verse is indicating his role as somebody building up a family. It's almost, if I have to confess, a little bit annoying just how perfect he is at everything. Like every verse tells us how great he did this and how perfectly he did this and how there was never a flaw. And then you just begin to wonder, like, okay, he's a Shakti Vaish avatar, so he's going to get everything right. But then how do I approach this now? Like, it's just like, give him one struggle at least, like, so we can relate, But Prithu Maharaj is there to give us this perfect example. And right now, he's also giving the perfect example by not just being aloof to the material world, but by being in the material world and then navigating it perfectly. Being able to grow a family, rule the world, like you think, trying to manage a job and maintain a family is so hard to do together, And then we think, okay, how about managing a family and ruling the world? There you go, How's that for a challenge? But he does it and he executes it perfectly because he executes it perfectly in the spirit of detachment. So now we're hearing about, and like a theme that runs through this purport, where Prabhupada mentions it, it's in the verse, it's in the purport. He mentions that he begot children by his desire. And so in this class, I'm going to be bringing that up a few times in different ways of how we can understand what it means that Prithu Maharaj could beget children by his desire. So Prabhupada is really hammering in this purport the idea of conscious conception. The idea that, or what he calls in one purport, spiritual family planning. The idea that the act of bringing a child into this world is sacred, and that it combines with the idea of a samskara. Now, a samskara means a purificatory process where we're mentally preparing ourselves to engage in a sacrifice. And that in itself is powerful, because in conscious conception, the first idea is intentionality. There is intention. often in spiritual life, it happens such because it's part of our routine that we fall under the schlep of becoming automatic and just automatically going through the day, doing what we're meant to do. And actually it kind of happens a lot in deity worship because, maybe I'm speaking for myself, not judging anybody, but like you kind of know your hands are meant to go there, the plate's meant to go there, you're meant to do, your body kind of automatically does it. If you do it enough times, your body kind of automatically goes through things, as in the procedure. And then the mantras are there to sort of bring the mind back to what you're doing. The mantras are there to build the meditation. Even when we step on the altar, there's a purificatory process, whether you're doing achmana or whether you're reciting mantras to remind you of the Bhuta Shuddhi, like your position in the material world as a spirit soul in the material world, or whether you're and every deity you approach has mantras in order to purify the consciousness so that we are mentally present and we don't fall into just routine action. So the idea is that also samskaras are there for purification so that we have the proper mental activity, mental mindset. So conscious conception, it's hinting firstly, Prithu Maharaj could conceive these children by his desire, because it wasn't, oops. It wasn't like, as happens in the material world, that when couples come together, then it's like, okay, wow, surprise, I'm pregnant. The idea that it's not a planned child. So on that first level, Prithu Maharaj is by his desire. He wanted the children, and so therefore he engaged in the idea, in the purificatory process to conceive those children. So intentionality is there. And when intentionality is not there, then Prabhupada is saying that we have Varna Sankara, or unwanted population. And this sticks out to me because it says Prithu Maharaj wanted children by his desire. And then you get Varna Sankara, which is unwanted or undesired population. So very much the idea is there that we have to execute all our devotional service with intentionality, with intention. And for intention, it means our mind, our body, and our heart have to be aligned and present when we're doing something. And therefore, it begs us to be conscious of our actions. So Prabhupada is saying that the secrets to success is a parent's executing the samskara. Now, whereas many of us would have heard of Garbhadan samskara, for the sake of people listening and may not know, what is the Garbhadan samskara? So the Garbhadan samskara is a purificatory process that a couple will engage in before intentionally wanting to conceive a child. It's described in different methods of it is described in different places, but the essence is that there should be cleanliness, so there should be bathing, there should be mantra, and there should be the intention of begetting a child. Now, Srila Prabhupada, our founder Acharya, as he has done many times in our lives, has made things very clear, and in his, not really in the Shastra, as in not in the verses, but in Srila Prabhupada's letters and in his desire for us as a movement, he indicates that the parents should take shelter of the holy name by chanting 50 rounds of the Hare Krishna mantra before conceiving a child. He places that number, just like how he placed our 16 rounds, just like how he placed the 4 regulative principles, which there's no specific verse in the Shastra that says, to be initiated, you need to chant 16 rounds and follow the 4 regulative principles. It doesn't exist. But our Acharya, who is able to see the vision of the Shastra and refine it for us, has said, you chant 16 rounds, and coming from the idea of the interaction between the pastimes of Kali and King Parikshit and the bull, we get the four regulative principles coming up, and Srila Prabhupada draws on that, and he gives us four regulative principles, and he makes them the requirement for initiation. And so in a similar way, Srila Prabhupada is the one who's giving us the procedure for the Garbhodan Samskara. That one is meant to approach the action, approach conception, by taking shelter of the holy name. And why? Because Prabhupada is saying that the mentality of the mindset, the intention of the parents, both the mother and the father, is going to attract a certain child to the womb. So, and he's very clear here that because so the second understanding of by his desire is that because Prithu Maharaj is able to attract the type of child that he desires by the Garbhodan Samskara. He's able to attract the quality of human being to appear in this world by his mindset. Now this is revolutionary. In the whole world, this is revolutionary. I mean, if you go and you look at a general wedding ceremony, and then you think like, to tell a couple chant 16 rounds before you try to get a child isn't the most romantic thing in the world. It's like, what? It's revolutionary. But it's revolutionary because there must be intentionality. There must be purification of the mind so that the focus is that we're engaging in an activity that where Krishna is present and where a certain child can be attracted. And that's why the world tends to have, and that means you now raise the consciousness of the population of the world. Because children who have already been situated in the devotional path they are then allowed entrance into the world. Now, the opposite is that when there isn't intentionality, when there isn't conscious conception, is that and if conception is just based on physical desire, then we're attracting Shri Shri Radharanath ki jai, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Giriraj Govardhan ki jai. We're attracting souls with that mentality into the world. So it leaves a responsibility. There's a responsibility on the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement, on our movement as a whole, to be able to change the consciousness of the population by our intentionality. So that's a huge responsibility. But also, if you think about it, your entire good portion of your life is going to go to raise this child. And you want to have a bit of an easier time if you have a little bit of intentionality. Now, that being said, these statements really have to be balanced. Because it does not mean that, if your little angel's a rascal, that, that's no 50 round a child. People can't be judgmental like that. Because you have no idea of someone's heart and their space and their life. And so therefore, it should be noted, that Advaita Acharya had 6 children. And 3 followed the process of bhakti according to what Advaita Acharya put out. And 3 became an Upper Sampradaya. And this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Combination of Mahavishnu and Shiva. So what are we going to say? His consciousness wasn't right at the point of conception? You can't. Those are immaculate conceptions. So the idea is that, you can't, it is one samskara, but it doesn't mean it doesn't mean that you can just completely direct the path of your child and they're always going to be an angel. You just there's a reality of the world that they're living in. And as I have seen, come 13, things, it hits the fan. Because you're going to have to deal with a conditioned living entity in the material world who's hitting puberty. And good luck, that's really hard. It's really hard. Like, my hat's off to all the parents out there. Like, it takes a lot to be able to raise a teenager and make sure that, and try, because you can't make sure, because they're their own soul. to try to raise them in an environment that is supportive of their Krishna consciousness, because that's all you can do, And I've seen, like, even within devotee kids, if they're raised in an environment that's very Krishna conscious, but restrictive, then when they reach a stage where there's freedom, then they really want to explore out there, and they can get into trouble. It's one of the reasons why when we're in university, we don't see very often many devotee kids who are connecting to us, because it's the one opportunity where, not because they're bad, not because they just want to be in Maya, but because they're not confident in their identity as a Hare Krishna. Because they're stepping into a world that does everything against that identity. Imagine a child trying to explain Garbhadan Samskara to their friends. Like, it's a different world when they're like, doing proms, and like, it's a different world. And so it's hard. It's the pressure on the shoulders of parents, and the pressure on the teenagers, because then there's a society, and the society has a certain expectation of them. And when that expectation, and when they haven't made that jump of choosing Krishna consciousness based on their own experience, then I find, and this is just my opinion, that it's best to treat a devotee born in the Hare Krishna movement like you would a BYS student. Don't expect them to know things. Don't expect them to know mantras. Don't expect them to have to be following something. Don't even expect them to be chanting Hare Krishna unless they have made those decisions themselves, and then they can start building their own faith, not just because my parents told me, or because my parents want me to. There was one thing Mahatma Prabhu said that I thought was so profound, was that he would chant his 16 rounds at one go, and he would do so knowing that he wanted to do that, not that it was a burden. And he never asked his daughter once to chant Hare Krishna, pick up your beads and chant japa. But because she could see that his activity of chanting was not a burden, and that he really enjoyed it, she took up chanting. And then there were days when she would just chant 64 rounds. So when we tell, it's what you do and what you say. And I get caught all the time because I don't have children, but when they're students, this is how you burn off your children karma all the time. It's like, it's a retreat, you got rounds to do, the kids are there, and like we experience it 3 days in a year. And imagine if you're a mother or a father and you have to experience it for the whole child-bearing age, It's like, and then he's like, you got your beady bag in one hand, and you're trying to organize things, and it's like the worst impression ever, And because sometimes chanting can feel burdensome when there's a lot of service going around. And so for a parent, how you present your own Krishna consciousness in action speaks much louder than telling your child, chant Hare Krishna, did you chant your rounds now? It speaks much louder because they're smart. And the first people you criticize and analyze are your parents, So that really takes its toll. So therefore, I'm saying all this as to offer my obeisances to all the parents out there who are trying to raise children. And to understand then also from a parent's perspective, I thought something that would be interesting to speak about is, so what if there's no Garbhadan Samskara? What if you didn't know about it, it wasn't, whatever reason, it didn't happen? You can't then hold this against the child and yourself. You can't now just maintain this guilt trip like, okay, now we don't know what sort of soul got attracted to the womb. We have to understand, Srila Prabhupada mentions, and it's Shastric, that all of us who weren't born in devotee families, like me, I wasn't, we didn't have Garbhadan Samskara, but we can still follow the process of bhakti, we can still be purified, we can still engage in all the tenets of devotional service. We didn't have anything of that hampering our path. Of course, we've got to deal with our own minds, And that's because Srila Prabhupada is saying by adopting the process of devotional service, all 10 of the samskaras are complete. Now, as I use this verse, please understand, it is not a consolation not to undergo the samskara, but it's also to say that it's not the end of the world. The process of bhakti is powerful. And the fact that these are two Vaishnavas who are coming together, who are trying to chant Hare Krishna, who have the inclination to the path of bhakti, all of that has to be taken into account. Just like if at the time of death, a devotee dies in some crazy accident, or, you can't just think, oh, at that moment, what happened? Even though Krishna says at that moment, what you think of at the time of death will determine your future. The whole life of the devotee is also going to be placed on the scale. We have to embrace the Shastra in compassion and realism. Both have to be there. We can't just take a verse or take a principle and label it and class it and let it be there to hang ourselves all the time. So I just wanted to present that perspective. So one thing Prabhupada is saying is that the mental state of the parents will influence the soul attracted to the womb, and he uses the words, will reflect their mental condition. Will reflect their mental condition. So that's why I was thinking the third idea of why these children were achieved by his desire was because our mental condition is our desires. And so our desires are reflected in the child that we attract. Our level of devotion is reflected in the child that we attract. And that's interesting because I was thinking about all this psychology that comes across that way we inhabit the traits of our parents. What I've noticed, especially the ones that you don't like, you'll see it come up in you all the time. It just happens. And people think that no, it's genetic and it's this and it's that, and maybe it is all of those things. But one understanding is it's the desires of the parent, because the mental state of the parent is reflected in terms of the child that is attracted to the womb. So in those ways we can see that Prithu Maharaj was able to achieve these children by his desire, because he wanted them, they was intentional, because he got the children the type of children that he desired. Because sometimes there's my desires and there's the type of children that I desire. I want an angel, but I have some horns. So there's a conflict there. There's a conflict there, and both desires have to be taken into account, just like your karma. I want a Ferrari, but I got money for a Taz. So karma has to play. So therefore we have to take those things into account. But what it's emphasizing here is that these children were not achieved just through lust. But neither was it achieved in the idea that I just want this child because I want my child, because I so desperately want a child. Not that that's wrong, But he achieved these children, he conceived these children with the idea of the future generations of the world. So he had a more selfless perspective. And that's what these samskaras are there for. They're there to purify the mind so we can have a more selfless perspective. So the idea there is to tell us that there are consequences. Desires have consequences. And therefore, we see that the mode of passion, as defined by the Bhagavad Gita, it's pleasure in the beginning and pain in the end. Which means that if our actions are just based on lust, there's the momentary pleasure, but there is then a lifetime of trying to raise a child. And so therefore, the Bhagavad Gita is telling us that pleasure in the mode of passion is problematic. Now, the understanding is like yesterday and today, the idea of sense gratification came up. And yes, it's interesting that the answer that was brought forward, that sense gratification means to satisfy one's senses. At the same time, we know that the senses cannot be satisfied. So it's a contradiction. And then I was thinking about the Beatles song, senses never satisfied, always swelling like a tide that will drown you in the material world. George Harrison. So the senses are there, and we're saying that sense gratification is the satisfaction of the senses, but at the same time we know that the senses, according to George Harrison, is never satisfied, and according to Prabhupada. And that is because the senses are, that is when the senses are used selfishly, when they're used independent of devotion. But I think that opinion is that to just see the senses as an enemy may not be conducive for a sadhaka. Because, Srila Prabhupada says that the mind has 6 enemies: lust, anger, greed, etc. And that the senses are like snakes, So I'm taking all that into account. But the only platform, if we look at the platform of engaging the senses, if you put it on a number line, then on one end you're going to have sinful engagement, and that's going to be like enjoyment in the mode of passion and ignorance and giving suffering. Then in the middle you're going to have, there's like an element of where the senses are engaged in devotion, but we're not yet fully purified. So we're becoming purified by engaging the senses in devotion. There's some feedback. It happens, okay. By engaging the senses in devotion. But that means, like, I like mangoes, so I offer Krishna mangoes. As compared to, Krishna loves mangoes, let me offer him a mango. From A to B, there's a whole variation of the heart, that has to happen. So I love mangoes, but I know I have to offer it, don't offer it, get karma, and so offer the mango, So the heart is changing, and from there to there is a whole process of purification. And then in the pure stage, we're really at, this is for you, Krishna. This is for you, Krishna. It's not about my senses. But in the in-between stage, when we're still identifying with this body, I'm wondering if it is helpful to see the senses as an enemy. Because if I still think that I'm the body, and as much as I know I'm not, I still think it. I don't know about you, but I still think it. I still act on it every day, Then in that period of time, if the senses are the enemy, then I'm also the enemy. Then I'm my own enemy. Then there's a whole big dichotomy happening. And there is struggle. There's internal struggle. So in that period, it may be useful to see the senses as not just enemies, but to see the senses as potential friends. Just like Raghunath Das Goswami says in Manashiksha, my dear mind, please place yourself at the lotus feet of Krishna. Because when something knows that you think it's the enemy, then it means that we are at war. And if we're at war, it means it's on the other side and it's fighting for survival. And then it's going to give you a hard time. But if we try to enter some peace negotiations and say like, okay, yes, ultimately you will feel incredible joy as the senses if you direct it towards Krishna. And we try to actually not just make the mind our friend, because the interaction between the mind and the senses is strong. The senses themselves, they're not enemies. What did your eyes do to you? Nothing. The sense itself is not doing anything to you. It's in conjunction with the mind. And so if we're meant to make the mind our friend, then maybe the senses have to also become friends. And maybe that's a little bit more of a harmonious path while being in that process of purification between Krishna, here's the mango because I want to eat it, and Krishna, here's the mango because you want it. In that, between that levels of devotion. So when we're in that selfish stage, when we're engaging when the senses are engaged in sinful ways or in ways independent of Krishna, meaning like, oh, mango, yum, just eat it, there's no Krishna in the picture, it means that gives pleasure and frustration, It's a combination of pleasure and frustration. Because the material world is designed like that. There's some sand in the sweet rice. You can eat tons of mangoes unless it's hot season in India, because India mangoes, no, come on. South Africans don't know about mangoes. It's like, if you go to India and you eat mangoes in the hot season, those are mangoes, Those, you don't need anything else. Like, you can just eat mangoes for breakfast, mangoes for lunch, mangoes for supper. And when you do that, you increase the heat in your body and you get boils in the summer season and you suffer. So the idea is that the material world, pain and pleasure are just intimately mixed. They're intimately mixed. We can't really get... I don't know what it's doing. It never did this before. Sorry. Okay. Never did that before. Okay. Pain and pleasure intimately mixed. And then in the stage of devotion, we're blended. When we're in the stage of purification, there's a blending happening, because there's my desires and there's Krishna's desires, and it's two different colors, and they're somehow meeting in the middle. And we're trying to stay on the side where it's bona fide, like you're reading all the ingredients in the shop. Is it bona fide? It's not like, we're trying to say, what does Krishna love to eat? He likes... you see, kachoris came to my mind because I like kachoris. Right? It's, what does Krishna likes to eat? He likes puri stuffed with cream. When you're not thinking about that when you're reading the ingredients in the supermarket, because your kid wants a packet of chips or something. So our desires are blended. Our desires are blended in this stage. But the more that we can at least, if the heart isn't fully there, if the mind isn't fully there, if the body isn't fully there, but we place it there, the more the process of purification happens until we come to the pure stage. And in that stage, the senses are not enemies. The senses are experiencing the most incredible form of bliss. They're completely stunned, because Mother Yashoda is getting stunned because all the senses are in complete ecstasy. So in the pure stage, we're not against the senses, because the senses have their right purpose. And it's not the senses' fault they're not engaged properly. I have to take responsibility there. So therefore I'm proposing that we, in the process of trying to make the mind, senses, body a friend, like what Bhagavad Gita is trying for us to do, we have to enter a negotiation that may be not just be go to war. That's my point. So what I want to say is that the world can offer us pleasure. And to say that there's no happiness in the material world, because this whole verse hinging on the Garbhadan samskara, hinging on the idea of pleasure that we can achieve in this world, and regulating that pleasure and not regulating that pleasure, we should understand that just to tell somebody the material world doesn't make you happy is not enough. It's not enough. Because, there is some pleasure in the material world. It's just there. And if you tell your mind, no, it don't taste nice, your mind knows, yes, it does. Yes, it does. You're lying. It's not stupid. It knows, So therefore, it's not just about denying the pleasure of the material world, but it's about understanding how that pleasure is limited in deep satisfaction, in deep fulfillment. And this is the challenge. We are in states, I'm speaking for myself, in being in a state of where we don't experience the full spiritual ecstasy. So therefore, we're in a state of, in some sense, spiritual deprivation. And at the same time, we're saying, don't look at the material world. And so it's hard. And so therefore, it comes upon us that it behooves us, it is intrinsically really important if we want to survive in Krishna consciousness, that we look for spiritual nourishment. That we take the time to look for spiritual nourishment. And it may not just be that it's inculcated in the morning program, although the morning program gives you tons of spiritual nourishment, and only an idiot won't take advantage of it. But I was talking to myself, I wasn't talking to anybody, that was really to me. But the idea is that as we move on in Krishna consciousness, what brings us spiritual nourishment becomes a little bit individual, and we have to be able to ascertain where that nourishment will come from, how that nourishment will come from, together under guidance. Because if we just do it ourselves, we can just go along the route of my mind. I think this will nourish me. So together with higher guidance, because unless you get that nourishment, we won't feel the deeper satisfaction that comes from the spiritual process, and then the senses become starved, and then we're in trouble. We're in trouble. And therefore, when we see this view, Prabhupada is referring to this verse here. He says that sex life, Krishna says, I am sex life according to the religious principles. And it can happen in a spiritual tradition that encourages celibacy and regulated sexual activity, that we become callous. We become callous to the and harder, the more hard-hearted, the more we push away what we think is wrong, without being able to look at it with proper vision and with kindness and with a holistic idea of where you're going on the spiritual path. Because it is difficult, and really difficult, to have very high ideals while being very conditioned. And then you look at the high ideals, and you think like it's really high, and I try to jump at the high ideals, every time I fall down flat on my face and get scarred, and then the idea that you look around you and everybody else seems to be fine with the high ideals, and then you start thinking like, okay, no, something's wrong with me here. And now I can't say it that I'm the only one not at the high ideal, And then you breed, and then even if you're getting the high ideals, then when you get the high ideals, you look down and say, it's really hard to hold this bar. Like, if you're holding a bar and you're doing pull-ups, it's called pull-ups. Pull-ups, because you're pulling your body up. Push-ups is on the floor, right? Anyway, so whatever, you can see I don't exercise so much. But, you're pulling your body up, then you're holding onto a high bar, and it's not a level where we're actually at. Then you want to look at everybody else and say, so who's not pulling the bar? There's that tendency. So to counteract these both tendencies, it's important that we can charter the path of bhakti with compassion, understanding that we're in a conditioned state moving towards a pure state, and we're attempting to make the mind and the senses devotees as we're attending. It's real preaching. It's real preaching. Just like having a child, everyone has a child. You have your mind, and that child can be constantly 13. It's not like it's just a baby, you have to feed it. When your mind's a teenager, it's constantly 13, it constantly wants the world, and you have to sometimes, and I find myself, this works for me, you have to sometimes preach to that child, to your mind, like it's somebody outside of you. And sometimes it's not just with a stick and a shoe, sometimes you do need to take the stick and the shoe when the mind gets crazy. But sometimes it requires bridging a friendship, because to make the mind is either your friend or your enemy. So making the mind a friend requires that we're able to sometimes talk to our mind, as crazy as that sounds, and be able to negotiate a path of devotion, and to show the mind that actually the senses achieve satisfaction when it's aligned with Krishna, not just by sensual deprivation. So I'm going to stop there. And just to recap, Prithu Maharaj achieved these children by his own desire, and that is a focus on conscious conception and intentionality. And actually my last point being that even if Garbhada and Samskara has nothing to do with your life, every action is a conscious creation, whether you're cooking in the devotee kitchen, or you're going out to work and have to do a project or assignment, it's a conscious creation. And let every conscious creation be preceded by an act of purification, so that we have the right mentality and it can be intentional. All right, any thoughts, comments, or questions? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Firstly, for someone that's not a parent, or not a mother, but you've done an excellent job in presenting what really is going on in the material world. So I as a parent can tell you, I as a parent and a teacher can tell you, the hardest job in the world is to be a parent. And like you correctly said, to lead by example is very important. And have a supporting hand on your child, not a pushy hand. We find the parents of today are very, very pushy. They want the child to achieve what they have not achieved in their life personally. And this is the biggest problem that we're encountering. Then the other point I want to make is that if something doesn't happen intrinsically for you, and when you make the call that, oh, this is for me, this is what I need to imbibe in my life, it's very, very difficult to constantly tell somebody, hey, I think you should be doing this and not this, and try to correct behavior thereafter. And I'll give you an example. In the late 1980s, I was standing at the bus stop and I was waiting for my wife to come from work, because she worked a little outside Johannesburg, and I used to stand at the bus stop and wait for her. And so there was a devotee called Madri, that's Nishingananda's wife. So she was distributing books. And you know, Madri with her flamboyance and whatever, hey, Prabhu, this is going to improve your life. I said, oh, okay. How? She said, no, I would like you to take this book and read it. And it was 2 Rand at that time, and I didn't have the 2 Rand on me at that time. She said, no, this doesn't matter. You take the book and read it. I'll be here again tomorrow, and you can come and give me the 2 Rand. So I took the book, The Science of Self-Realization, and I started reading it. Mataji, I only put the book down when I completed it the next morning at about 6 o'clock or so. I read it continuously. And then I realized, wow, I need to become a vegetarian. So I phoned my mom, and I told my mom, right, Mom, I'm becoming a vegetarian this week. She said, you will not last 1 week. And I said, okay, I'm going to try. Because my mom and I used to have this ongoing battle that Monday was a good day and the other days of the week were bad days, because my mom felt that we should fast on that Monday. And boy, oh boy, did we clash on that Monday. We used to have a lot of fights until she gave me what I wanted. I won't want to mention it here today, but that's how it was. But because I had intrinsically made that connection that I wanted to give up meat, I started. And of course, my wife wasn't on the same page with me at that point in time. And then when she came down to Durban, I had shaved up. I had gone to Muldersdrift. And when she came back from Durban, boy, oh boy, she was in a bad space. Then I realized, no, I need to step back. I need to step back because we had got married when we went devotees, but now that we've come in contact, it's like I was on the fast lane and my wife was nowhere near. But happy to say today I am playing catch up with my wife because she's in a position where I am nowhere near. And it was all because she used to come and sit at the temple and she used to look at the people in the deity kitchen. She said, I want to get into that kitchen and I don't care whatever it takes. So we found out what is the procedure, what we have to do. And believe you me, I had no inclination of wanting to get initiated. I didn't have that. I did have that inclination to get initiated in the late 80s. In fact, I wrote up to Lord Chaitanya Swami, who was then Raghuveer Prabhu. I probably would have been his first disciple. But I realized if I went ahead and did that, and my wife and I would probably got divorced. And so because of my wife's yearning to get in the deity kitchen, we got initiation, and I'm happy to say today she's dragged me along with her, and I'm happy to say, like you correctly said, we have to look at where there's nourishment for the soul and the happiness that we get from the duties that we perform. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for sharing that story, Prabhu. It's very entertaining and also very true. I think second to raising a child is to have to negotiate a happy Krishna conscious marriage. Very difficult thing, and but possible because we see some good examples, and I think it's on an individual level. So thank you so much for sharing that. Hare Krishna. Anybody else? Or does we end it? Okay. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki